Hey, welcome back. Today we're going to dive into something that's transformative, how your physical reality is constantly reflecting your emotional story. So, you know those moments when you look at an old photo and barely recognize yourself, or when your stomach bloats after certain conversations? How about when your inflammation markers are high despite doing everything right? Or that empty feeling after scrolling social media for hours? Here's the thing, these aren't random disconnected experiences. They're actually sophisticated communication systems trying to guide you back into authentic living. And I want to share something personal with you after watching my mother carry anxiety like an armor for decades and seeing how it ultimately manifested as cancer. I experienced my own health crisis that forced me to recognize how years of self-abandonment had literally rewired my nervous system. What I discovered completely transformed my relationship with my body and my understanding of wellness. And today, I'm sharing 5 powerful insights about how your physical reality actually reflects your emotional patterns and how listening to these reflections can transform your relationship with yourself and with others. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Have you ever looked at photos from a few years ago and barely recognized yourself? Not just like, oh, I had different hair, this kind of thing, but in that deeper, like, who was that person? Looking at photos from 3 years ago, I felt like a different person that was staring back at me. The face was mine, but something behind the eyes completely had shifted. I found myself wondering, was I healthier then? Happier? What had I lost? After my breakdown and my health crisis and my own healing journey, I realized something profound. I wasn't mourning lost health. I was mourning the performance of wellness. Those photos were me holding it all together beautifully while coming apart on the inside. Listen, we all have our stories. For me, growing up, learning to prioritize everyone else's comfort over my own truth, I'd perfect the art of looking fine while abandoning myself internally. Those old photos showed the price of that performance. And while fascinating as it is, just those photos just don't show what fashion changes or aging they might reveal, the emotional states that were present at the time. So things like stress patterns literally showing up in my face, energy levels visible in the eyes, self-care practice or lack of thereof showing in my skin, boundary health reflected in my posture, and nervous system state captured in expression. I actually remember obsessing over how much worse I looked in current photos compared to past ones, until I realized I was comparing apples to oranges. The person I was then was in a completely different emotional reality than the person I am now. The breakthrough for me came when I actually stopped comparing versions of myself and started honoring all phases of my journey. The exhausted perfectionist in me, the old photos did the best he could with the resources he still had available. The more integrated me now continues this evolution. And what photos really document isn't deterioration, it's adaptation and transformation. Stress, trauma, healing, and growth all leave visible marks on our physical form. Your body tells a story of what you've survived and how you've evolved. And this realization was incredibly liberating for me because instead of fighting changes or beating myself up about them, I could see them as evidence of my journey, like emotional tree rings marking seasons of growth. Your transformation isn't a loss. It's actually an integration of everything you've learned. The physical changes reflect internal growth. When you can embrace all versions of yourself with compassion, you free yourself from the endless cycle of comparison and self-judgment. So let's talk about something many of us experience but rarely discuss, and that's how emotional suppression physically manifests in your body, especially your digestive system. Every meeting where I bit my tongue, swallowed my opinions, or smiled through my discomfort, my stomach would bloat. Not just a little, I'd look basically almost like I was pregnant by the end of the day. Doctors, they called it IBS. I knew it was something deeper though. After my health crisis revealed how emotional suppression triggers physical inflammation, I understood. My gut was literally trying to digest what my voice could not express. And in my family of origin, growing up as the family peacekeeper, I'd learned that my authentic opinions could destabilize others. It was better just to swallow my words than risk connection. But my body was keeping score of every unspoken truth. The science here is actually fascinating, and your gut houses what scientists call your second brain. It's called the enteric nervous system. It contains over 100 million neurons and produces 90% of your body's serotonin, the feel-good chemical. When you suppress emotions, your gut literally responds. I started noticing patterns in my digestive symptoms, stomach distension after certain interactions where I didn't speak my truth, gas and discomfort following confrontations where I people-pleased, digestive upset after meetings where I suppressed my real opinions, physical expansion that directly mirrored my emotional contraction. There's a direct physiological reason for this. Emotional suppression triggers inflammation. Stress hormones directly affect digestion. Unspoken words create intestinal tension. People-pleasing disrupts your gut microbiome. What you don't say verbally, your body expresses physically. And what's being processed in these moments? Anger that's swallowed instead of expressed. Frustration held in the stomach. Disagreement suppressed for peace. Needs for validation that go unexpressed. Your authentic voice being overridden. The transformation came for me when I started treating digestive symptoms as boundary signals. Instead of reaching for probiotics or digestive enzymes, which have their place, but weren't addressing the root cause, I started expressing microtruths. So instead of restrictive diets, I practiced authentic communication. For immediate relief, I developed simple practices, things like gentle breathing to calm the vagus nerve, walking to move stagnant energy, and journaling to release unexpressed thoughts. But the real healing came from the long-term work. So developing comfort with uncomfortable conversations, creating safety for my true voice, and honoring my gut reactions, literally my gut reactions, as wisdom. Because your gut is always processing food and emotions. And when you give your emotions appropriate expression, you free your digestive system to do its physical job more efficiently. So now let's explore something that completely changed my understanding of self-connection. And that is heart coherence. See, I spent years seeking connection with others while being a stranger to myself. I'd panic when someone seemed upset, analyze every interaction, and abandon my needs to manage others' emotions. Then I discovered that heart coherence wasn't just some woo-woo meditation technique. It was about coming home to myself. After panic attacks showed me how disconnected I was from my own body, I learned something that revolutionized my approach to relationships. The quality of my relationship with myself determined the quality of all my other relationships. The science here is remarkable. Your heart has its own neural network with about 40,000 neurons. It generates an electromagnetic current field 60 times stronger than your brain's field. I mean, just think of that. It's incredible. The rhythm of your heartbeat directly influences your brain chemistry and your emotional state. And when you're under chronic stress or in self-abandonment patterns, your heart rhythm becomes chaotic and erratic. But when you're in a state of coherence, when your heart rhythm follows a smooth sine wave pattern, you think more clearly, you make better decisions, and you create a field of safety that literally others can feel. In my family, growing up as the family's emotional thermometer, I learned to prioritize others' heart rhythms over my own. And the result? Well, complete dysregulation and a pattern of attracting people who needed managing rather than meeting. The breakthrough came when I started prioritizing my heart coherence before any interaction. I check in with myself before checking in with others. I began building the relationship with myself that I'd always sought externally. A simple practice that transformed my heart connection was what's called Fivefive breathing. So you inhale for 5 seconds, hold for 5, exhale for 5 seconds. while placing my hand on my heart center. Just 3 minutes, even just 1 minute of this creates measurable changes in heart rhythm coherence. And I also started asking my heart what it actually needed each day and listening without judgment. See, this wasn't abstract. I'd literally place my hand on my heart, breathe into that space, and ask, what do you need today? And I'd honor the first answer that arose. What changed everything about heart-based self-connection was realizing that coherence creates space for authentic choice. It reduces people-pleasing impulses because you're in touch with your own needs first. It strengthens your internal compass, and ironically, it models healthier relationship dynamics for everyone around you. Your heart literally is the wisest relationship advisor, but you have to establish that connection internally before it can guide your external connections. So let's jump here now and talk about something really concrete that changed my understanding of wellness. And that's how lab tests and inflammation markers reveal your emotional health. When my own inflammation markers came back sky high, I was shocked. I was quote unquote healthy, right? Exercising regularly, eating well, taking all the right supplements, but the numbers revealed what I'd been denying. My self-abandonment patterns were destroying me from the inside out. After watching how my mother's chronic anxiety manifested as physical illness, I started seeing lab results as emotional insight tools, not just medical data. Growing up as everyone's emotional support system while ignoring my own needs had created chronic inflammatory patterns. My body was in constant fight or flight, treating my lifestyle like an ongoing threat. What most doctors don't discuss is how intimately your biomarkers reflect your emotional patterns. What's known as C-reactive protein levels don't just indicate infection, they also reflect chronic stress patterns. Your cortisol rhythm reveals self-care consistency. Blood sugar fluctuations mirror boundary health, and inflammatory markers increase with unprocessed emotions. Even thyroid function reflects how you distribute your energy. These aren't just correlations. There are direct physiological pathways. High inflammation is directly tied to chronic fight or flight activation. Dysregulated cortisol is a direct result of boundary violations. Insulin resistance often develops alongside self-abandonment patterns. Poor lipid panels can reflect stress-induced eating. The transformation happened when I started treating lab results as feedback about my self-relationship rather than random medical issues or just genetic bad luck. Every boundary violation showed up in my inflammation markers. Every self-prioritization decision improved my numbers. I began implementing what I called root cause emotional work. Alongside proper nutrition and supplements, I noticed how people-pleasing triggered inflammatory responses in real time. I practiced authentic expression and watched systemic inflammation decrease. Prioritizing myself stabilized blood sugar, processing emotions decreased inflammatory biomarkers, and one practice that helped integrate this understanding was weekly stress inflammation journaling. Tracking life events alongside physical symptoms and connecting the dots between emotional patterns and biological responses. I'd celebrate biological improvements as evidence of emotional healing, not just random fluctuations. Because your body is constantly giving you data. Inflammation is just its way of asking for respect. When you recognize that your biology reflects your biography, you can approach healing from a truly integrated perspective. And then finally, let's explore something many of us experience but rarely understand, and that is the peculiar emptiness after scrolling through social media, despite supposedly being connected to hundreds, if not thousands of other people. I used to spend hours scrolling, feeling more disconnected with each swipe. Despite hundreds of followers, even thousands, I felt utterly alone. The loneliness after closing Instagram was actually worse than just being by myself without my phone. After my health crisis revealed how isolation impacts physical health, I started questioning why digital connection left me feeling so empty. The science behind this phenomenon is actually pretty fascinating. Because see, our nervous systems evolved over millennia to respond to in-person connection. Face-to-face interaction actually increases oxytocin, the bonding hormone. Physical presence activates mirror neurons that create empathy. Shared laughter regulates our nervous system. Eye contact creates trust hormones. Touch releases neurochemicals that signal safety. But what happens on social media is completely different physiologically. You get a dopamine hit from notifications, the same neurotransmitter involved in, guess what? Addiction. You experience oxytocin deficit from virtual interaction, and cortisol increases with social comparison. Your mirror neurons aren't properly activated, and your amygdala, the threat detection center in your brain, goes into overdrive from viewing carefully curated lives that make your own seem, frankly, inadequate. Growing up as the family's emotional manager, I'd learned to prioritize others' needs over authentic connection. And as an adult now, social media had become the perfect place to continue this pattern, performing connection without vulnerability, seeking validation without reciprocity. The emptiness after scrolling has biological roots. So digital dopamine doesn't sustain well-being the way oxytocin does. Virtual validation lacks embodiment. Curated comparison triggers inadequacy. Surface interaction leaves deeper connection needs actually unmet. And your energy gets depleted without genuine nourishment. The transformation came when I prioritized 10 minutes of face-to-face connection over hours of scrolling. I started sending voice notes instead of text comments. I scheduled video calls to replace endless feed browsing. I made plans for in-person coffee rather than DM conversations. I also established what I call digital boundary practice. This is conscious consumption in windows of time where I use social media intentionally rather than mindlessly. I focused on quality over quantity in online connections. And I prioritized real-world social planning. I shifted from performance to presence in what I shared. I practiced energy protection through selective engagement. Because here's the thing, your nervous system knows the difference between authentic and artificial connection. When you honor its need for embodied presence, you stop trying to fill a face-to-face sized hole with digital solutions. We've journeyed through photos of transformation evidence, digestive symptoms as boundary signals, heart coherence as a relationship foundation, inflammation as emotional feedback, and social media emptiness, frankly, as connection mismatch. All different facets of the same truth, and that is that your physical reality is constantly communicating your emotional story. When I look back at who I was before my own health crisis, the person trying to people please his way to worthiness, disconnected from his own body signals and managing everyone else's emotions while ignoring his own, I frankly feel such compassion for that former version of myself. Because here's the thing, I did the best I could with the tools I had. And that's what I want to leave you with today. Compassion for wherever you are in this journey of reclaiming connection with your authentic self. The transformation isn't at all about perfection. It's about presence. It's about pausing long enough to hear your body has been trying to tell you all along. Because here's the deal. Your photos tell the story of your evolution, not your failure. Your digestive symptoms reveal boundary wisdom, not weakness. Your heart coherence creates relationship foundations, not just stress reduction. Your inflammation markers, well, they offer emotional feedback, not just medical data. And your response to social media highlights connection needs, not technology problems. When we heal our relationship with our physical reality, we heal our relationship with our emotional truth. And when we heal that connection, everything shifts. So I invite you to try just one practice from today's video. Maybe it's speaking compassionately to your past self in the photos. Maybe it's even listening to your gut signals during difficult conversations. Any of these things. And maybe, maybe it's even practicing heart coherence before interactions. Maybe it's even correlating emotional events with physical symptoms. Whatever it might be, I respect you and I honor you for where you're at in this journey. I want to thank you for being here today and start where you are with what feels accessible.